All right, good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Brown, and due to the absence of our chair, Splendorio, and the lack of an appointment of a vice chair, I will be chairing the meeting today. Would we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, thank you. I will officially call this meeting to order. And could we start with a roll call, please?
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Hobart. Commissioner Hernandez.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Miley. Chair Splendorio. Absent. Alternate Commissioner Marchand.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Tan.
Present.
Alternate Commissioner Von Heater-Leopold.
Here.
Let the record reflect, roll call has been taken and we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. All right, we'd like to welcome a new commissioner today, and she's calling in remotely. The commission will learn the outcome of the new appointment made by the Independent Special District, and we have learned that the Independent Special District Committee selected Mary Ellen Faria from the Eden Township Healthcare District as our new commission of the new special district. Welcome.
I don't believe Mary Ellen is here today, but we're glad to have her. She won a good fight yesterday at the Independent Special District Selection Committee. There was a runoff, and she is now our new member, and hopefully we'll have her at our next regular meeting.
Terrific, thank you. But for those that are interested, here's a little bit of information about our new director. She's a registered nurse with over 30 years in the healthcare experience, both as a caregiver and as an administrator. She's been the director of nursing at St. Rose Hospital in San Leandro and Kaiser Permanente in San Leandro. As a lifelong resident of Hayward, she's active in the community. She served as a planning commissioner for the city of Hayward and was a former human services commissioner, as well as a board member for the Hayward Area Historical Society. So we give her a warm welcome and look forward to meeting her in person. Our next agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity from anyone from the audience, both in person or by remote, to address the commission on matters not listed on the agenda today. Within the jurisdiction of the Alameda County LAFCO, the commission cannot act upon matters that are not appearing on this agenda, and we do ask that speakers are limited to 3 minutes. I don't have any speaker cards for those in the room. Do you have any speaker card, staff?
No, we do not. We have not received any speaker cards.
All right, I'll close public hearing then and move on to agenda item 5, which is the appointment of an alternate public member. The Alameda County Local Agency Formation Commission will consider recommendation from its ad hoc selection committee to appoint Mr. Bob Warner as our alternate public member. I'd like to receive a verbal presentation, if I may, staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So at its January 12th regular meeting, the commission authorized staff to begin the recruitment of its alternate public member seat and establish an ad hoc selection committee to review applications for that position. On March 31st, the committee interviewed 2 applicants, and based on the interviews, expertise, and LAFCO knowledge, the committee recommends the appointment of Mr. Bob Warner as the alternate public member. As a reminder of the the appointment of the public member requires an affirmative vote of at least 1 member from each of the appointing authorities, and that's the county, city, and special district members. With that, I will return the item to the chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up the public hearing. Do we have any people that would like to speak on this agenda item before we take nominations and a vote?
No, we do not, Chair.
I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to our group. Do we looking for comments or a motion to approve?
I will move that we accept the appointment of Bob Warner for the LAFCO Commissioner
I will go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. We'd like to take a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Hobart, Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miley, Chair Splendorio, absent. Alternate Commissioner Marchand,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Tam,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Von Heater Leopold.
Aye.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Terrific. So if it's all right, we'd like to have him join us on the dais.
Come on down.
All right, congratulations. All right, just give him a minute to be settled. Forward, sir. Do you have a few words you'd like to speak to the group?
I say thank you, and I'm glad to be back. I think this is a very important organization, and I'm glad to be able to contribute.
We're very pleased that you're back on the dais with us. All right, we're moving on to consent items. These are considered routine in nature and normally passed by a single vote. I'd like to see if anybody on any directors would like to pull an item for further discussion. Seeing none here in the room, I don't hear anybody from the hybrid meeting format. So I'm looking for public comment. So if I could public comment, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
I do not.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. And Director Marchand.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Hobart, Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Ham,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Von Heater Leopold,
Aye.
and Alternate Commissioner Warner.
Yes.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Thank you. Agenda item 7 is the nomination of the election of a chair and vice chair. Do you have a staff report?
I do, Chair. I would like to say that Alameda LAFCO elects its officers, the chair and vice chair, at the May regular meeting for a period of 2 years, with newly elected officers assuming office at the next regular meeting. As set forth in the commission's policies and procedures, the city member is the next commissioner to serve as chair in the established rotation for officers. Staff recommends the commission nominate and elect the city member as the commission chair and elect and nominate a vice chair for a period of 2 years. And with that, I'll return the item to the chair.
Question, the vice chair, is that specific to a group within the organization?
I think that has been the practice as well. I'm not sure. For our previous 2-year period, we did have both public members, as one as chair, one as vice chair.
Who would be then, if I could, who would be next after the city member to be a chair?
Yes.
For the last one, I thought I was vice chair last time,
Yes.
but I wasn't a public member.
Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Newly public member.
So I with that, then I don't think there is a rotation for the vice chair.
Okay.
So that's just up to the commission to elect that. I will say from city, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now, so sorry, not looking at my staff report, but I believe it will be the special district member.
Okay, special districts. Okay, all right.
Special district for vice chair.
For vice chair.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with
No,
that.
excuse me. I believe I thought you were talking about for the next chair. For vice chair,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just up to the commission.
Okay.
Okay, anybody then? Okay, all right, thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anybody that would like to speak on this agenda item?
We do not.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it to the commission for discussion. Yes,
I'll
sir.
move
Just wanted to
Carla Brown
clarify,
for the
the
chair.
next, the vice chair is coming from the special district, is that it or not?
No, it's not.
It could.
It could. It's up to the commission.
Oh, it's up to the commission, but in the past, the vice chair has come from where the chair goes next,
No,
hasn't?
it's just been.
That's
anybody.
just happenstance this last time. Okay.
Yeah.
Director Marchand, did you have a comment?
I will move Carla Brown. I will nominate Carla Brown for the chair.
Thank you very much. Do you have a nomination for vice chair?
I'll leave that to the rest of the commission.
Okay, thank you.
I'll nominate Ralph Johnson for vice chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I'll second.
second both.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion made and seconded. Could we take a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Brown,
Yes, and I'm honored to serve.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
alternate Commissioner Tam,
Aye.
alternate Commissioner Von Heater Leopold,
Aye.
and alternate Commissioner Warner.
Aye.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, the presentation of the Alameda County Water District groundwater conditions. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair. So Alameda LAFCO will receive a presentation from Michelle Walden, the groundwater resources manager from the Alameda County Water District regarding the management of Niles Cone Subbasin. Luckily, Michelle Walden is providing a presentation in person today. It's just for information and feedback from the commission and just to get some commission discussion started. So thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
For that introduction, just making sure this is on. Thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Michelle Walden. As previously mentioned, I'm the Groundwater Resources Manager at Alameda County Water District. I've worked at the district over 20 years, and I'm here with my supervisor, the Director of Water Resources, Laura Heides. Some of you know Laura. And I just want to thank you again. So good afternoon, commissioners, staff, members of the public. So before I get into the detail about our groundwater management programs, a little bit about ACWD. This is a figure showing our boundary as well as our sphere of influence. So we're located within Fremont, Newark, Union City in the southern portion of Hayward. And a little bit about the history of the district. So the district was created in 1940 under the Special District Bill. And we were created in order to protect the Niles Cone groundwater basin and also protect Alameda Creek watershed. And we were created because there was a growing water demand, and outside cities were coming into the basin and were actually pumping groundwater and exporting it. So there was a drop in groundwater levels, which resulted in saltwater intrusion into the Niles Cone. And it wasn't actually until 1930s that the district got into the retail water distribution business. And today we currently serve a population of over 345,000 customers and have over 86,000 connections. A little bit about our water supply sources. We actually have multiple supplies, and this has really helped us to persevere over the most recent droughts. So the first is our Alameda Creek watershed runoff, which accounts for about 40%. And then that's our local supply. And then we have two imported water supplies, both from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and the State Water Project, which together combined is approximately 60%. So here's another figure showing the district as well as the Niles Cone groundwater basin. And what I'd like to call attention to is a couple of key features on this figure. So one being that there are Hayward detachment areas. And so those are the dark gray areas to the north. So those are areas that were formerly located within the district's boundaries, but they were detached under LAFCO through agreements where, so as they were being developed, the city could provide water service, but the district maintained the groundwater management authority. And then also you have the Hayward Fault, which is the black dashed line cutting through Union City and Fremont. This is a very important feature within our service area because the Hayward Fault actually acts as a hydraulic barrier in the groundwater basin. And so we actually have two sub areas within the Niles Cone, the below Hayward Fault sub-basin area, as well as the above Hayward Fault. And with that hydraulic barrier, you see different water levels on either side of the fault. And it also helped to create kind of like a saltwater intrusion barrier when we started to see that as early as the 1920s. And I'll show you that through another slide. Also want to call attention to our recharge facilities. So you can see that there's a lot of ponds adjacent to Alameda Creek. So those are former quarry mines that the district purchased over time. And we now recharge the groundwater basin. So it's Quarry Lakes Recreational Area. If you've never been there, I highly recommend it. It's beautiful. So what is the district doing to manage and protect our groundwater basin? This slide is just a snapshot of all the programs that we have, some of which were started back when we were created, such as the groundwater basin monitoring, and others have been formed and developed over time, especially with an urbanization of the area. So as I mentioned before, the district was created in 1914. And so a lot of our management and protection programs developed over time. And a lot of that was voluntary. With the enactment of SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, in 2014, it really changed how groundwater management was occurring throughout the state. So basins that were considered medium or high priority basins, and that was based on meeting specific criteria like use, being utilized, and who was using it. A lot of those basins were required to also comply with SGMA. So all of our programs and activities and laws that we had established to manage and protect the basin enabled the district to easily submit an alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan for the compliance with SGMA. So we submitted that in 2016. It took DWR, or the Department of Water Resources, a little bit of time because this was all new to everybody in the state. So, and ultimately our plan got approved, and we actually just submitted our 5-year update of our plan. So with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, there's basically 6 key areas where you're focusing in on, where you're trying to see, okay, if the basin's operated in a certain way or just naturally occurring, are there any potential undesirable results that can happen? And so you can see on this slide the 6 that are listed. And so when you're looking at the 2 sub areas with the above Hayward Fault sub basin, the lowering of groundwater levels, or specifically the possible declining well yield, is a possibility if you operate the basin under a certain water level in that part of the basin. And then the below Hayward Fault, which is hydraulically connected to the bay through one specific aquifer, is susceptible to saltwater intrusion. So what does Alameda County Water District do to ensure that we don't have those undesirable results? We basically make sure that we maintain groundwater levels on either side of those sub areas to ensure that we don't have any of those undesirable results. And here's a little bit, the slide shows a little bit more detail, but if you were really going to summarize it, you add enough recharge and you don't over pump, and we're sustainably managing the basin. So this is a fun little animation that one of the groundwater resources team put together to explain how saltwater intrusion specifically happens in the Niles Cone. So I'm going to point out a couple key features. So the red angry droplets is the saltwater intrusion. Then you have our Newark Aquifer, which is our most shallow regional aquifer. And then if you go all the way to the right of the figure, you can see the Hayward Fault. Now the blue areas represent where the sands and cobbles and gravels are located in the basin. So our above Hayward Fault part of the basin, which is the right-hand side of the Hayward Fault, you can see that there's continuous water. It's basically an unconfined aquifer. And then when you go to the left side of the Hayward Fault, or the west, that's where you start to see very distinguished aquifers that have you'll have sand and gravels, and then you'll have some silts and clays that impede groundwater flow. And then you have other aquifers below those, such as our Centerville Fremont, as well as deep aquifers. So with the pumpers coming in to export water, wells were installed to take water to Oakland and San Francisco. It created groundwater levels specifically in the Newark Aquifer to decline. So because that part of the basin is hydraulically connected to the bay, the salt water started to come in through the Newark Aquifer. And as it continued to overdraft the basin, the salt came all the way inland, all the way up to the Hayward Fault. And so because salt is heavier than water, it actually then went down to some of our lower aquifers. It was also transported into or moved into the other deeper aquifers through abandoned water wells. So once there was an understanding, a clear understanding of how the saltwater intrusion was occurring, the district knew it had to raise water levels and really work on recharging the groundwater basin. And so in the early 1900s, the district started to impound water on Alameda Creek. And as I previously mentioned, as the quarry pits were eventually they weren't financially feasible anymore for the quarry operators, the district swooped in and started to purchase them one by one and then divert water off of Alameda Creek through our water rights permit in order to help in the recharge activities the district was undertaking. So here you can see an aerial shot of the Quarry Lakes recreational area as well as the adjacent ponds. Alameda Creek is the thin sliver that kind of goes between them. The Hayward Fault actually cuts in between the Peralta Tyson wellfield and the Mowry wellfield. Those are district facilities where we extract groundwater and we supply it to our customers. And so that's a little bit. And then that's the top left photo is actually one of our rubber dams. The district used to do earthen dams, but eventually went to rubber dams. So this figure is a great, kind of tells the district story of different planning as well as capital improvement programs and projects we've undertaken over the years. This graph specifically shows the Newark Aquifer, which is the one that's hydraulically connected to the bay. And it shows that by 1972, we were able to get the water levels consistently above sea level. And we are basically in kind of a maintenance mode at this point when it comes to water levels in the Newark Aquifer. So a part of the district's recharge activities, as I mentioned, we divert water off of Alameda Creek. And in 1997, the steelhead trout was identified as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. And so at that time, the district started to work on, okay, how do we ensure that the steelhead can migrate in and out of the Alameda Creek watershed? And so this slide shows a number of the activities that we've undertaken. We've installed fish screens in our diversion takes, as well as we now have 2 completed fish ladders. And everything is completed in 2022 now. And so now we're learning how to operate the fish ladders. All right. So, let me rewind because this one happens fast. Okay, so now you have our recharge water. This is the continuation of how so once you have the salt water into the basin, now we're recharging with clean, great, wonderful water, right? So it's the happy blue droplet that then shows pushing the angry salt water back out towards the bay, specifically in the Newark Aquifer. And then we also have our Aquifer Reclamation Program wells that are screened in the Newark Aquifer as well as the Centerville Fremont aquifers, where we actually pump the trapped brackish groundwater and we treat that at our Newark desalinization facility. And we provide that as potable water supply also to our customers. So how well does the program work? Well, this is a figure that shows the cleanup area since 1962 in the Newark Aquifer. So you can see the black hashed area is the area of cleanup so far. So the main goal is to keep the salt water at bay, literally, by having a positive gradient towards west, towards the bay. And so if you were to remove the salt pond areas, we have about 47% that we've cleaned up. So how do we know how well we're doing? Well, we need to monitor groundwater levels as well as the water quality through total dissolved solids and chlorides and monitoring wells that we have throughout the district. So the the photo to the left shows a monitoring well cluster, and you can see the concrete pads. Those are 5 wells located in a neighborhood, and they're screened in each one of the aquifers in the below Hayward Fault. Groundwater resources staff goes out and takes water level measurements. And then we have what we call our pump truck that does airlift to it lifts the water out of the monitoring wells, and we collect those water samples. in order to find out how we're doing as far as keeping the saltwater intrusion from reoccurring. And then that all goes into annual reports, both our groundwater monitoring report as well as our Sustainable Groundwater Management Act annual report. The district has a lot of other programs that we're involved in. One is through cooperative agreements, and it's our groundwater protection program. We work alongside with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, as well as the cities within the service area, to ensure the cleanup of leaking underground fuel tank sites, as well as spills and cleanup sites that, such as dry cleaners. And because once the shallow groundwater zone underneath them gets contaminated, we look to have it cleaned up so it doesn't get into the drinking water aquifers. We also have been the well permitting agency since well permits were required in 1974 by the state. And so this just shows kind of in 1 year what we do. So we issued 324 permits in 2022. We oversee a number of different activities, from geotechnical exploratory holes to monitoring wells. Very rarely do we have a new water well going in, but we do typically have at least 10 water wells destroyed every year. So in addition to a couple of those other programs, we really make sure that we're coordinating with the land use agencies, which is all the cities within our area, specifically when it comes to development or redevelopment, as well as the California Environmental Quality Act. The district has historical maps that date back to 1915. And so we've overlaid those in GIS. So we're able to see where all the older wells were if they weren't already addressed. And so we'll identify those wells on a development project, ensure their proper destruction. And also with the low impact development and keeping stormwater on site, some of our areas have shallow groundwater and it's within 3 feet to 5 feet. And so we ensure that whatever stormwater they're catching, that there's adequate buffer to ensure that the oils and greases that get captured don't get into the groundwater basin as well. And then we're always looking to the future. So we always are having some sort of either groundwater study or project underway. Our team specifically is very good at obtaining state grants when it comes to installing new monitoring wells. And so, we're always looking to see what we can learn more about the basin. So these figures show, you can see an old water well, you can see the windmill, and that's the development that went in once the well was destroyed on this photo. So that's just a very brief high flyover of all the things that we do. I'd be happy to answer any question that the commission may have.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for the director for coming. Let's see if we have any questions. I'm going to start with our board member, Marshawn. Do you have any questions?
You know, Michelle, it's great to see you again. Great presentation. And I think that really one of the great successes is taking the brackish saltwater that came in and contaminated the aquifer and turning that into drinking water at the Clark-Redeker demin facility. So you take the contaminated water, brackish water, and turn it into a drinking water source. And I think that was great planning on the district's part. And congratulations, very good program. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Marshawn. Nice to hear your voice. I can't see you right now.
From one water engineer to another. Any other comments or questions from our commission?
Just
Yes.
more of a comment. I used to work for the flood control district, and I think in the 1980s, I worked very closely with Jim Reynolds at the construction of the earthen dams in Alameda Creek. And the big trick was not so much building them, but getting them out before the rainy season started. So that was always a panic, but it was fun.
I could imagine.
Commissioner Tam would like to speak as well.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Hi. So I retired as the water resources manager at East Bay Mud last year. So that's the reason I was really curious about this particular presentation. So I appreciate the details and the update. The question that I had pertained to the comment you made about Alameda Creek and the water rights that were associated with that. And I was trying to understand the hydraulic connectivity with the groundwater basin in Alameda Creek, because I didn't think you could divert surface water to replenish the groundwater up until recently.
So I'm not our water rights expert, but the water right permit does come from the state board, and we do
Right.
have beneficial use because the water that we recharge, it gets extracted, not just by Alameda County Water District, by cities. They also have wells for a lot of their parks, so that the beneficial use is linked there.
Okay, so the end use is by the other cities, because you had 60% coming from imported water, Hetchy and the State Water Project, and 40% coming from local runoff. So I wasn't sure where that end use was.
Right. Okay, I understand now. So the 60%, that is not utilized for recharge. We do from occasion, we'll use some of our state water project water to from that gets stored in Del Val, and we will discharge that down the creek to recover, but we do capture that water back through the groundwater wells. But the majority, that 60%, actually goes through our treatment plants and or is blended with groundwater. And so that's not typically used for groundwater recharge. The 40% is primarily the groundwater recharge.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good question.
Yes, great.
Commissioner Warner.
I just was curious about the well permits. Who typically are applying for well permits?
It's changed over time, especially since I've been at the district. But a majority of it now is consultants. So drillers used to come and get their own permits, whether it was for geotech work or for exploratory holes and monitoring wells, but the consultants are really involved in overseeing any work on any development project. Water well drillers still get their own permits if they're going to install a water well or destroy a water well. And then they do it on behalf of the landowner.
Okay. Second question. Okay. All right. Any other commissioners? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation today. It's very, very helpful. I do want to hold tight for just a moment. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to ask a question?
We have one public comment.
There you go.
Mr. Rio, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. So this is for the Alameda County Water District, which is very close to Fremont. I'd like to have all of you please compare and contrast the situation in Fremont with the situation in the Tri-Valley. If you look at the Fremont, they had this contamination issue with salt water from the bay. They then took a number of measures to address that. Now, what is the comparable situation in Tri-Valley? Well, there's PFAS, and it seems to be coming in a certain plume that originates in the Northeast. But that's unclear. What is the with the head shaking, the negativity going on in the audience? But it's unclear what is the source and what is the solution. Likewise, with the another desalination measure was reverse osmosis in a brackish desal in Newark. Tremendous success. And how did that happen? Well, it had a lot of permitting and so on, but the relationship between ACWD and the local cities, the local agencies, very cooperative. They seem to have very good relations with local cities and local agencies. If you look at the Tri-Valley, the amount of infighting going on with, particularly with respect to PFAS treatment, with respect to groundwater management, it's amazingly contentious out there. And the disagreements about what to do, and particularly about potable water reuse, are legendary. So what does all this mean? I really think that the lessons here of ACWD are not so much technical as they are managerial and political. I believe that ACWD has a lot to teach the Tri-Valley and a lot to teach the Zone 7 Water Agency about how to run a groundwater basin and how to run a water agency. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other speakers? I guess that
No other
wasn't
speakers, Chair.
that wasn't a direct question for you, but just a comment. Thank you so much for your presentation. Okay. All right. I'll close the public hearing and move on to
Excuse me, Chair, I believe we have one, Commissioner Marchand wanted to comment on that. I
Would
believe.
like to respond back, certainly.
Sure,
Commissioner?
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So brackish water desal is very straightforward. And one of the major differences is that Alameda County Water District is a retailer. Zone 7 is a water wholesaler. It's a completely different relationship between the cities and the customers. PFAS is a whole nother problem. Brackish water desal, you're talking about parts per million, hundreds of parts per million, or even up to parts per thousand in brackish water. PFAS, you're talking about down in the parts per billion levels, so many orders of magnitude. So to compare those two really is completely different. But again, one is a water retailer, one is a water wholesaler. So very, very different animals. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Excellent point. And actually, we're measuring PFAS contamination in parts per trillion.
Yeah.
So very, very tiny levels
As opposed
of
to parts
contamination.
per thousand.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Chair, I don't think there's any infighting in the Tri-Valley. I think there's a lot of discussion. There's a difference.
I would totally agree with you on that. And a very high level discussion, actually, very, very terrific technical folks that are a part of that discussion. Okay, any other speakers? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on agenda item 8 and move on to agenda item 9, which is a presentation of multi-agency water reuse programs.
Thank you, Chair. So we will receive, the Commission will receive a presentation from Mr. Eric Rosenblum, a licensed and board certified environmental engineer who helps industrial and municipal clients through the evaluation of alternatives, development of agreements, and the design and implementation of sustainable water reuse projects. Mr. Rosenblum previously managed operations at the regional wastewater treatment plant serving the Silicon Valley area, and where he was responsible for the design, construction, startup, and operation of the South Bay Water Recycling Program, the Bay's largest urban water reuse program. He will provide the Commission a presentation on lessons for successful collaboration that support local and regional reuse projects by identifying challenges, opportunities, and models for interagency collaboration.
Welcome, Mr. Rosenblum.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and commissioners, members of the public. I'm here basically to cheer you on in response to a discussion you had a couple of months ago regarding recommendations that were in your municipal service review, specifically on water, wastewater, flood control, and you wisely suggested that Alameda LAFCO should create a county-wide regional water and wastewater committee to enhance the ability of the local agencies to practice water reuse and to work together to solve other problems. And I was invited, I think, to share that you are at the forefront of a growing movement to do such a thing. And I think you're the right group to do that. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on why this is such an important thing you've done and how you can, I think, serve the region as a whole and to provide guidance and leadership in this area. So why a countywide regional water and wastewater committee? Why bring water agencies, wastewater agencies, groups that have very important jobs to do on their own? Why create a committee to bring them together? And I'm going to be referencing work that I did with my colleagues on a project for the EPA that was just completed last year. It was a 2-year study of multi-agency collaboration, and specifically the factors that influence successful collaborations between agencies. But why this is important is that all of our, as you well know, all of our institutions that were established, especially special districts, were developed to solve a specific problem. They were created at a certain time, a certain place, and they did that. And they continue to serve that end. The challenge is that the problems continue to evolve faster than the institutions. And one of the opportunities that presents is that by not abandoning these institutions, but by allowing them to work together in appropriate configurations, you can create essentially virtual utilities that can solve multiple benefits, solve challenging problems with multiple benefit solutions. So we're going to look a little bit about what that means, the characteristics of multi-agency projects, and how we can help agencies overcome the obstacles to collaboration and the specific role that this LAFCO could play in that regard. With respect to the institutions, it's interesting. You look back at the special districts, among the first ones that were formed in California were land reclamation districts designed to remove the water from the land so it could be farmed, bring settlers into California. That worked pretty well, and Central Valley became the breadbasket, or at least the salad bowl of the United States, and provides food to the world. By the 1920s, it was necessary to manage that water more effectively to ensure that the farmers who had come to work the land had water. And so we created these agricultural irrigation districts. By the 1950s, as California's population skewed urban, it then became necessary, as you know, to create urban water districts and special districts, many of whom are under your purview. But the problems did not stop with the development of those special districts. In fact, by the 1980s, when wastewater plants and the sanitation districts were challenged not just to remove specific pollutants, but to look at their overall impact on the receiving waters, that up-leveled the game for pollution control, which was heightened even further on the wastewater side by the need to follow trace pollutants. By the 2000s, we were looking at pharmaceuticals and personal care products, endocrine disrupting compounds, and constituents of emerging concern, some of the 80,000 compounds on the EPA's list that we're still identifying in trace levels and having to remove in order to protect the public. And of course, PFAS is just the latest iteration of that. And now, of course, we're dealing with a whole other round of problems, the extreme weather events that have been associated with climate change, diminished snowpack, which for years has been our reservoir of last resort in the mountains, the ones that kept California's water moving, the extended droughts that we've experienced, and even the episodic floods like the ones that happened just a few months ago. All of these things are presenting challenges to our special districts that they have not had to deal before. We gave a presentation on this at a recent conference in Denmark, and we asked the attendees how many were working for agencies that had been in existence for 100 years or more, and half the room raised their hands. And we asked how many of them in that charter were dealing with climate change. It's a new thing. Now, what's very interesting, I wanted to share this with you, is doing the research for EPA, we ran across an article from the California Law Review from 1957 by one of the architects of the Special District Act. This article was written right as the special districts were being created to serve urban populations. And the author, Albert Henley, wisely observed that it seems likely that a great deal of water management work in the future will be done by two or more districts or other public agencies working together, because it will be more and more advantageous for them to unite their resources. Well, truer words were never spoken. And it's interesting that at its origin, the authors could see the need to transcend the limitations of these acts. Nor was that the last time that we looked specifically with respect to water recycling in how to work together. A long-term program that was co-sponsored by the Bureau of Reclamation issued a report in 1998, the Bay Area Regional Water Recycling Program, which looked at how all of the agencies in the Bay Area could collectively recycle as much as 400,000 acre feet of water a year at a cost at the time, which was estimated at about $1,800 an acre foot, which seems very reasonable by today's standards. More recently, in 2012, we had a meeting that was sponsored by the Bay Area Clean Water Agencies and the Bureau of Reclamation, some other groups, to look specifically at opportunities in the Bay Area to work together across agency boundaries. And in one case, representing agencies that you're directly responsible for, East Bay Mud and DSRSD talked about their then fairly recent DERWA project, about how important it was for these agencies to form a joint powers authority. And as Jeff Hansen from DSRSD observed at the time, there were bumps along the way, and it's necessary for the agencies to be honest about their differences in order to move forward. This is, I think, where LAFCO comes in, is you have a standing based on your authority that allows you to look on both sides of the fence and consider the agencies in terms of both their limitations and their abilities. Well, it was in this context that I was able to work with EPA over the last 2 years and their National Water Reuse Action Plan. They created this plan a few years ago. It was announced in February 2019, and by September, they had created a draft which included all of the ways the federal government was prepared to increase the capacity for water reuse in the United States, including providing technology, grants for agencies, help with regulatory authorities. But one thing that was not addressed was the challenge of working across agency boundaries. So a number of us, a few of my colleagues, during the public comment period, we said, look, you can't get there from here unless you take seriously the challenge of working across agency boundaries. You cannot overlook the opportunity to support collaboration. EPA was a little bit concerned about appearing to come forward and tell locals how to do work, because it's not usually a good way to get invited to those parties. But they asked us to help them. And so we created an action item, support local and regional reuse projects by identifying challenges, opportunities, and models for interagency collaboration. I just want to acknowledge the team I was privileged to work with, some of you, whom are familiar to you, especially Felicia Marcus, the past chair of the Water Board, Dave Smith, who was with Region 9 EPA. And we worked on this project and looked at 5 areas across the country where successful programs had emerged through the interaction of various agencies, including Chesapeake Bay area of Eastern Virginia, North Central Texas, Southern Arizona, and 2 projects in California, the Monterey Bay program, as well as the projects that are impending now in Southern California, where in a matter of 10 years or so, the LA area will be recycling about 1/2 of a billion gallons a day of recycled water. We looked at 5 factors: governance, regulations, economics, management, and the last one not to be ignored is leadership and the importance of those in influencing the success of these programs. We reaffirmed what I shared with you earlier, that these community needs evolve much more quickly than the institutions. And so it's a challenge to create opportunities for utilities to work together to address this. But when they do, they can create all kinds of multiple benefit projects. It does, however, require the reassessment of organizational goals. And in some cases, they have to get legislative approval. More often than not, no, though, it's just a matter of reframing their purpose with their own boards in order to see the opportunities to work together. With respect to the regulations, there's also a tendency for agencies who are able to navigate their own regulatory requirements being very reluctant to take on anyone else's burden. And that makes a lot of sense. By the same token, regulators are only too eager to help work these issues out if they're engaged early in the process. With respect to economics, which is a big factor when you look at water recycling, which is, as a new supply, is almost inevitably more expensive on a market basis than others if you don't take into account things like avoided costs or benefits in the form of natural amenities. So it's always important to consider the cost there. However, when agencies are looking at these factors, it's good to remind them, as only LAFCO can, that customers are paying for these bills out of 2 pockets in the same pair of pants. And usually it's the same ratepayers that are being challenged to come up with the money to pay for these projects, but it's the same people paying. So really you need to look at the overall cost to the community rather than the impact on rates of any one agency. But by working together, utilities can capture, treat, and reuse more water more effectively. On a management level, and this is where I had some experience managing the water recycling program for the South Bay, agencies have big responsibilities, and they are really reluctant to take on new jobs, especially with a whole other agency with whom they have no familiarity. So it's really important to develop that familiarity, to bring the agencies together, to build that trust. We learned from the North Texas agencies, for example, who collaborate on recycling 1 billion gallons, or 500 million gallons a day, about 500 million gallons a day in the North Texas area around Dallas-Fort Worth, where they treat the water from the Trinity River, use it, put it back in the river, retreat it and reuse it, using the water in the river as a conduit and matching their wastewater and water systems in a very efficient way to reuse the water for potable purposes without the extent of treatment that's often practiced in areas like in California. They pick a different restaurant every month to eat lunch at in order to get the staff to become familiar with each other so they can share their technology and accept the burden of these problems. The burden on the leaders of the managers of the agencies can be quite quite difficult. They have to be very flexible. As you might imagine, the managers of these districts have to make sure that they satisfy their boards, that they're able to take care of the work they're responsible for in the most economic fashion. At the same time, they have to be mindful of the opportunities that they have to work together. And that takes some doing. You have to be very flexible. And in that regard, I think I wanted to point out to LAFCO that you have a very special role in having highlighted this issue as one that the agencies, the special districts need to pay attention to. You've already exerted the leadership that I think will help them to bridge these gaps and to take on this challenge. So in conclusion, the water utilities serving communities, large and small, all face different problems today than they used to. And in response to these pressures, they can only create the resilient systems that we need for the community as a whole by working together. Recycled water, as you know, is a particularly valuable part of the portfolio of water supply. In that regard, the presentation we just heard about groundwater underscores that. Having another water supply that can be called upon to maintain water levels in the face of seawater intrusion, it just makes the community that much more secure. Agencies are required to do this to reevaluate their missions in the light of the current challenges, which can be really difficult. And that's why your call to them to work together and at least form a committee to begin having these conversations, I think, is very wise. It will help them to engage with regulators as a group and to create more appropriate long-term widespread analyses of the overall costs and benefits of these programs. Will help build trust and eventually enable them to fulfill their long-term mission as well as their immediate core goals. Two regards in that, I was very impressed with that report, by the way, that gave rise to the recommendation, including highlighting the agencies that are already actively working together, DERWA being, of course, one of the more obvious successes. But there are tremendous potential opportunities here in Alameda County to do that. And in that regard, your timing couldn't have been better. BACWA was one of the original sponsors of our work with EPA, has recently asked us to help them pull together a region-wide committee to develop a workshop for all of the water and wastewater and stormwater agencies in the Bay Area to begin addressing the issues of how they can work together more effectively. Frankly, I think LAFCO's willingness to take a leadership role here, for example, to take the time to actually convene that committee and to bring the agencies together with some assistance to profile their strengths and weaknesses and to start those conversations based on some prior background work that can help enrich those conversations, I think can really set the tone for the rest of the region as a whole. And this is just an example of one of the Water Research Foundation is just yesterday, I think, sponsored a project to do exactly that, which is the kind of thing that LAFCO or other agencies that were interested could put together a team to compete for, and I think would stand a good chance of being in the forefront of the national initiative to do that very thing. There's a link to the report. Again, I'm very glad to have had the opportunity to tell you about how your work is coinciding with work done all over the country, and that the team that I've been working with would love to be able to provide you some additional support in that regard if that's the direction you'd like to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Please stay right there. We have a few questions. I'll start with Commissioner Tam. Do you have any questions for our speaker? She may have logged off. Okay. Commissioner Marchand?
No, thank you. Excellent presentation. Certainly appreciate that.
Okay, I'll start around the table. Commissioner Warner?
I really enjoyed the presentation and quite informative, and it's good to have the encouragement to encourage the other agencies to cooperate.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, I especially liked your comment about I guess the silos that we built originally. We've got our water districts here and wastewater districts here. And really what we're attempting to do through this is get those two districts or two agencies or areas to work together, because we do have a shared resource. I'm a director at the East Bay Discharge Authority. And when we take people to our facility to show how much water is actually being wasted to the bay, people are just startled to see the amount of water. They're thinking it's just this little 6-inch pipe. Well, no, it's a 96-inch pipe that's full of water that runs 24 hours a day that discharges, perfectly treated wastewater into the bay. And that could be recycled. Yeah.
Good point. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Lebo.
You may be aware, we already have a multi-agency collaboration going on in the Tri-Valley. It's been there for 10 years and we move very slowly, but we are moving. But I noticed your example up there, your region was much broader than we are mostly because of where we get our water, which is so different from everybody else. So what would be your recommendation? Is our region big enough? Are we taking enough agencies into consideration, or should we really be reaching out to Hayward and Alameda County Water and CV-SAN and EBDA and all the rest?
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying with respect to the Tri-Valley area, you have specific partnerships that have served you well. And is there value in looking beyond those borders?
Correct.
And I don't know the answer directly to that, of what you would benefit by engaging with Hayward or East Bay Mud or others. But it seems to me that the concepts involved here are regional. The applications are always intensely local. And so in every case, I think what is helpful is to ask the questions broadly of what do we need here? What are the challenges we face? What kinds of projects would be of the greatest use for us? Who could be there to help us? But then, having done that initial review, and that's the sort of the background that I'm suggesting that it might be appropriate in convening a water and wastewater committee as you've recommended, and then look specifically at, well, what are the top needs we have and who do we want to work with first? So I think the short answer is, yes, I think it's useful to look beyond your boundaries. That doesn't mean you're not already doing the best job you can, but you won't know until you look.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have definitely defined that we do not have enough effluent to meet the demand for the recycled water, let alone potable. So thank you.
It may be that a partner agency that has more wastewater than they can have customers or demand for would be the appropriate partner.
Yeah, which is not happening right now in the Tri-Valley. We have plenty of customers for what we're creating in wastewater.
As we looked into this, if I may, found that there was no limit to the type of partnerships that can occur. In many places, especially in Europe, we found that industries that use water intensive have started partnering with the local agencies, in some cases actually building their wastewater plants to improve the quality of the municipal wastewater so that they can have access to it.
Actually, that's already happening in Cocoa County. Central SAN is already working with Standard Oil or one of the refineries. I don't recall which one, but one of the refineries already with their recycled water.
I think the point with respect to a committee like that is to start asking the right questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Hernandez.
I have no questions, but thank you for the presentation.
I've got one more.
Sure.
So I would like to recognize someone in the audience today. It's Gary Wolf. Gary is a member of the Castro Valley Sanitary District's Citizens Advisory Committee, and he also shares an interest in water recycling. Gary has quite a career in water resources. So Gary's volunteered to actually be on a committee to help us form this water and wastewater committee. So thank you, Gary. I appreciate your help. Okay.
Okay. All right. Maybe you can even mention things in public comment. I'm going to open it up here pretty soon. I just have a couple of questions for you, sir, before you leave. Similar to what was mentioned earlier, our effluent for what we'd call purple pipe or recycled water for irrigation is fully used. And when you talk about obtaining water from another network, the plumbing piping infrastructure is extremely expensive to do interconnect like that. So it might sound easy. Let's just go to Fremont and they've got extra water and then bring it here. But as much water as we can use for irrigation is all frees up potable water through traditional existing methodology for water delivery. So I know the Tri-Valley has been big supporters of purple pipe water. We've been able to get loans. The city of Pleasanton, I'll speak for, has been able to obtain loans from the state revolving fund and deliver recycled irrigation water to many of our large parks. So it's been a win-win. But when we talk about cost, if you're really going to go from effluent of like a DSRSD all the way to potable drinking water, there's a significant cost. And what is your thoughts for obtaining the funds to put together something like that? It's not something I can just add to my ratepayers' bills. It's too significant.
First of all, if I said anything to suggest that any part of this was easy, I misspoke, because I don't believe it is. I think it's very challenging, which is exactly why the leadership of a group like LAFCO is so important. We haven't really talked much about stormwater, which is another source, which has its own many difficult challenges in how to capture, and it's intermittent and it's less reliable than other sources, but it is another potential source that could be harnessed to support the use of water in different areas. I think the overall question you asked about what are the potential sources for potable reuse projects, I think that's one of the reasons that the federal government convened this water reuse action plan, because they recognized there was a national interest in creating reuse. I think a number of the pieces of major legislation that have passed Congress last time provided funding in various forms to help local communities take on that burden. But again, it's a very local question: is what is the best combination of reliable water sources, the best use of water at the costs that can be borne by the communities to meet those needs? And I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think that's why you need to look closely. Now, that said, there are ways that you can calculate those costs. For example, in terms of providing multiple benefits, if there's water that can be freed up, that can be used to create amenities, whether in the form of parks or other natural systems, that's another way to do it. If the investment in a water reuse program, even as expensive as a potable reuse program, helps avert the need to create additional pipelines to the discharge water of the bay, or prevents the need to expand a different water plant. I mean, those are all ways that you can look at the big picture costs. I think that's really the answer is, however you want to identify the cost of the project, make sure you're casting the net wide and looking at the total cost of the community of doing it or not doing it, not just the specific cost of that piece of water you're creating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have a comment?
I just want to I want to comment. Go ahead.
Okay.
But no, you're absolutely right with regards to it's about the community and what their needs are and what their end goal game is. Because I know in Dublin, the majority of our parks, we use the recyclable water.
Oh,
Except for right here,
yeah.
DSG, because we actually hooked up, we do regular water there. We only had a certain amount. And then we actually sent it over to the Donbiddle Park, which was one of our biggest parks in the heart of Dublin, which is about 30 acres. And so I know that our community feels that we've done what we've needed to do to be able to meet the needs. And so it is at many times passed to the ratepayers. I'll let Georgine finish the rest because she has a lot more knowledge in water than I do.
Just to add to what Melissa said, in regards to the ratepayers, we're very fortunate in that we have both sides, water and wastewater. So what we save for water customers, we charge wastewater customers. But I just, for everybody's edification, talk about throwing the net out and seeing what we catch. We're actually buying wastewater from Central Sand through a connectivity station in San Ramon, because we don't have enough recycled water. We have more customers than we have supply. And I know one of my staff sitting out there cringing, because we really don't want people to know that we were so successful in Derwa, we oversold the project. But because of less use in homes, instead of 250 gallons a day, that the average is only 100 gallons a day, which is not enough recycled water for all the customers we have. But anyway, that's the kind of thing you can do. We've been joking with CV San about buying some of theirs, but we'd have to pump it back over the hill, and that's when it gets expensive. The electricity charges for the pumping is ridiculous. So anyway, we are trying in the Tri-Valley to work collaboratively as much as we can, reaching out, and we are looking at a project with ACWD also to buy some of their excess water, wastewater. So we're trying.
If I can comment, I really appreciate what you said about, well, now the people are conserving water, so the flows are going down. Mm-hmm. This is the classic, what they call a wicked problem. Mm-hmm. Wicked problems are not just difficult, but the solutions depend on factors that continue to change, and the solutions depend upon the perspectives of the people that are making the decisions. And that's what's unique about it, which is why I was so delighted to see your recommendation, because clearly your agencies have already taken the challenge to work together. And the question now is, as the situation keeps evolving, as things keep changing, what can we do different? What can we do better? How can we continue to be ahead of the curve and meet the needs of our communities? And I think it was, again, I had never seen a LAFCO take the horse by the reins and say, okay, we're going to encourage the people to do this. And I think that's exactly the right way, because you have the perspective that looks beyond the jurisdictional boundaries. And I think it's terrific that you can encourage them to work together to solve these kinds of challenges.
Thank you.
Okay, before we I'll leave this topic, I'm going to throw one last thing. This is for the entire Alameda County. And as we heard, cities are different. The way they're organized, the way you have wastewater and water supply. City of Pleasanton is different. Special districts are different. Livermore is different. So one challenge with something as large as LAFCO for the entire Alameda County are these regions that are different. My community, for example, has PFAS in it in our water distribution line. And so we're working very hard to address that, because we don't want it to go anywhere else. We want it to stay where it's at. We want to treat it. So it's difficult for me to continue to endorse, I'll just say that for the record, a county-wide kind of distribution for water or wastewater or reuse, when each community is so unique and different with its challenges, its water contaminants, its water supply, its ability to be able to use salt water for treatment, for example, for saltwater intrusion. So each is so different. It's difficult to talk across a large region.
But clearly you're on a subject that's near and dear to me, and I could probably stand here for the next 2 days, but let me just end by saying this. What you brought out is one of the reasons why this approach is so powerful. Instead of creating one mega agency to do integrated water management for Alameda County, it really makes more sense to bring the individual agencies with detailed knowledge of their local conditions and their special challenges together to see what kinds of solutions they can craft jointly. In fact, this was brought out in an article by a professor on the subject, Michael Blomquist, who wrote an article called Integrated Water Management from the Ground Up, or from the Bottom Up. And that's exactly what he recommended, was rather than have one agency that's authorized to make decisions for everybody, really work to bring the knowledge of the individual agencies together, find opportunities for collaboration. And I encourage you to do that.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Warner.
Yeah, just want to add, when I took the presentation, it wasn't to create a super agency, but really to share best practices where appropriate. I mean, there are individual specifics, but in general, there are shared problems that can be worked together and, share the cost of the research on how to do it. So I think there's value to Alameda County-wide discussion, even though individual cities or regions have to tailor their solutions there. But it can't be that special that every little place has to have their own individual thought that's isolated.
Well, I think, and as you support the work of your agencies and encourage them to get together and provide them resources to help develop their background and understanding. I think that will be a model for the other agencies in the Bay Area to do the same in their respective counties.
Terrific. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to open up the public hearing. I don't see I have any speaker cards here. Do we have anybody?
We have one public comment. Mr. Brio, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. So the title of this presentation was something about potable reuse and on a regional level. But if you look at Antioch, potable reuse is not always the solution to everything. In Antioch, they had both a sewage plant and they're now building a desal, a brackish water treatment system right there. They could have built something with that sewage plant, but they chose to do it a different way, to go with the desalination approach. So there are different choices, and there are going to be different solutions depending on what your needs are and what each city or what each unique situation is. And at the border of Dublin and Pleasanton, near the intersection of 580 and 680, right now there's a microscopic, tiny pilot laboratory level potable reuse system being planned, and it will be implemented in the next year or two. It's already on the drawing boards, and it's going to be set up, and it's going to produce potable reuse water right there out of a sewage plant right there between Dublin and Pleasanton. Now, if you look at what I'm more interested in is not so much the technical details of that pilot laboratory project. It's take a look at who's on the list of promoters and sponsors and participants in that project, and then ask yourself, who is missing from that list? And then ask yourself, why is that? Why are those agencies or why is that city missing from the list? And you're going to learn more about political realities by studying that question than you will by studying all the chemistry and all the water treatment in the world. And then another problem, broader than potable reuse, broader than desal, broader than reliable water supply, is the reality is in California, it's a seasonal water supply. So what is the solution to that? Well, I think they figured that out a long time ago. It's called water storage. And local water storage in the Tri-Valley and in southern Alameda County is pretty lacking. We need more storage. And, what are we doing? Storage is another solution. It's an alternative solution, and sometimes it's the best solution, the most feasible. So that should be considered too. What can we do to expand local storage? And finally, when it comes to pricing, how can you put these huge water bills on the backs of your ratepayers? Well, the state of California has already figured out a way around this. For these large, massive state projects, a Delta conveyance, a Sites reservoir, whatever, they don't send the bills to the ratepayers. They put it on your property tax bills. They slip it right in there. And people don't even notice. They take huge amounts of money out of the property owners' pockets. It's quite a scheme. It's magnificent in its breadth and its scope and its audacity of fiscal
Thank you, Mr. Brio.
Cleverness. Thank you.
Thank you for your 3 minutes. Okay, terrific. All right. Do we have anyone else for speakers?
Yes, we do. We have Mr. Gary Wolf.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for introducing me earlier, Ralph, and thank you, Councilmember Brown, for inviting me to speak very briefly. I just wanted to comment that, as you well know, these projects take a decade or two to develop. They take a very long time. And so I just encourage you, yourselves, and all the agencies, as you bring agencies together, to think about 20 years from now, what will be needed then, and then back up to the conversations. Now, that's one of the ways at getting at some of the things that Eric was talking about. And something that's been on my mind a lot since the pandemic is the emergency powers of the governor. As a former member of the State Water Resources Control Board, I didn't really realize, even though I was doing water rights hearings, what the powers of the governor were until I saw the full actions taken under the pandemic, and then talked to some attorney friends and so forth, and discovered the governor can reallocate water in an emergency. So 20 years from now, we may see mega droughts affecting parts of California, and water gets reallocated by gubernatorial direction. And things are quite different than we imagined to be under the legal regime we're under now. So thinking that out and thinking, what do we do now to create resilience to that? not just to protect ourselves in our county, but also to maybe make money from it. If we have surplus water in an emergency, surplus being a relative term, but we may do very well financially by the governor reallocating it someplace, but paying us for that, them paying us for that. So there's all kinds of things that are difficult to imagine now, but if we start 20 years out and think backwards, may make a lot of sense. And that's the kind of process we need to begin now. So that was really my comment.
Good comment. All right, thank you. Any others?
No more public comments.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much for a robust discussion on water reuse. I don't think it was necessarily potable reuse, but water reuse discussion. The agenda item 10 is the adoption of a final operating budget and work plan for the fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Staff?
Thank you, Chair. The item returns to the Commission after a formal public review and comment period. The final budget and work plan remains intact from its initial draft. The Commission will consider adopting this final budget and work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. We have that the final operating budget expenses total $784,740, and that is a net increase of $38,312 or 5% from this current fiscal year. I'll keep it short and just say that staff recommends approval and return the item to the chair for any questions or commission discussion.
All right, do you have any questions from our commissioners? Those of you that are calling in, Mayor Marchand, Commissioner Marchand or Commissioner Tam?
No questions.
I'm good, thank you. Commented before.
Okay, all right. And commissioners? Seeing no interest to speak. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anybody that would like to speak on this agenda item?
No public comments, Chair.
I'll close the public hearing and bring it back for consideration.
I'll move adoption of the final operating budget.
Hernandez will second.
Motion made and seconded. Could we take a roll call vote, please?
Chair Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miley,
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Tam,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Von Heater Leopold,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Warner.
Yes.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, agenda item 11 is to initiate a government code for delinquent agency contributions. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll just keep this short, but staff wishes for the Commission to authorize the Executive Officer to initiate Government Code Section 56381C, and that would request the County Auditor to collect payment and figure out exactly what revenues owed by the agencies to collect from. We have the City of Oakland, the City of Alameda Healthcare District, and Dublin San Ramon Services District. And if approved, staff will work with the county auditor to figure out how to get those allocations. And I'll return the item to the chair for any comments, questions, or feedback.
I just had one question, if I could start, is what were the methods used to receive the funds that were not successful?
Initially, I believe sometime approximately in July, the county auditor will send out a first invoice notice to collect payments, and then figuring out, which agency has paid. They sent out a second invoice, and I believe the county auditor sent out a third one. So because we haven't received payment, this might get a little bit better traction. So
okay, all right, thank you. Any questions? For those of you that are calling in, Commissioner Miley, Tam, or Marchand?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, hearing none.
How much does the City of Alameda Healthcare District owe?
So the City of Alameda County Healthcare District, I believe it was about $10,000 and approximately $10,000. I know though staff has recently been in contact with me, the executive officer, so I believe payment will be coming soon for that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I apologize, as everyone knows, that is not DSRSD at its best. So I will find out what happened.
That is not typical, and I'm sure it won't have to come to that. So
Maybe it got lost in the flood.
And it was about $10,000 also. Okay. All right, commissioners, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how unusual is this? And is it just lack of communication? Something got lost in the mail or something?
At this stage in this period of the fiscal year, it's pretty unusual. So it could be chalked up to miscommunication or lost in the mail. So I'll definitely be reaching out to those individual city managers and general managers before and provide notice to them on that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anyone that would like to speak on this particular agenda item?
We have no public comment, Chair.
All right, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commissioners for discussion or a motion. Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. Could we take a roll call vote, please?
Chair Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miley,
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Tam,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Von Heater Leopold,
Aye.
Alternate Commissioner Warner.
Yes.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
All right, agenda item 12 is matters initiated by members of the commission. Do we have any matters to initiate? Yes, sir.
Yes, one, just wanted to give everyone an update on my grandson. Not many of you know, but 5 years ago, my grandson, who was 16 years old, was injured in a very serious wrestling accident, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. He was virtually a quadriplegic. He spent 2 years at a recovery facility in Colorado and came back home 3 years ago, graduated from high school on time. He's confined to a wheelchair, but he has been going to Diablo Valley Junior College for the last 3 years. He's going to graduate, and he's now presented with a real dilemma because he's been accepted at 3 UC schools, Berkeley, Davis, and Santa Barbara. I think his choice is going to be Santa Barbara, but that's where his sister is, and it's also farther away from home than Berkeley or Davis. So my wife and I are extremely proud of the efforts that he's put in, and he's making good progress. And still, I keep asking him, well, what's your positive attitude? He says, well, Grandpa, when I left here, I couldn't breathe on my own.
Yeah.
He said, thank God that I can at least do that. And I've got most of my other facilities back, and I'm fine. So really good. Thank you.
What an incredible young man.
Yeah.
You have so much to be proud of. In 3 very challenging colleges he's being
Yes.
offered positions at. So that is a great story.
Well, if he attends Santa Barbara, my best friend's son's there. So if he needs someone to show him around.
Okay.
And it's quite a beautiful college,
Yes,
as
it
are
is.
the others. But any other matters initiated? Okay, thank you for the update. Anybody from our hybrid meeting like to initiate any future agenda items?
Nothing here from Marchand.
Okay, seeing none. All right, we'd like to move forward for an executive officer's report.
Thank you, Chair. Staff would just like to give an update on our ongoing projects. We believe we received an administrative draft from our consultant, Richard Berkson, on the preliminary comprehensive fiscal analysis that will look at a proposed incorporation of Castro Valley and its surrounding communities. And they are Ashland, Cherryland, San Lorenzo, Fairview, and Hayward Acres. We are waiting on some data from the Sheriff's Department, but we believe we'll have a complete draft by the end of this month and should have a public draft for commission review at our July meeting. We will also showcase that report right after the public draft to some of the MACs for review and comment and additional stakeholders, as well as the service providers that may provide those services to that proposed incorporation area. And then as far as the South Livermore Valley Area Plan Study, staff is our consultant there, Lanfear Gregory, and staff have been working and discussing with the county, as well as the Tri-Valley Conservancy and some of the I think a subset of the MAC group, or excuse me, the Agricultural Advisory Committee will be speaking with them and discussing the information in that study to have a public draft ready for the commission's review at, again, our July meeting. And then lastly, the fire MSR, hopefully, I believe we're on task to have a public draft for review at the July meeting as well. So just wanted to update that. And if there are any questions from the commission, I'll return the item to the chair.
Questions? I think you've been very complete. Thank you very much. We have some informational items. Would you like to comment on those?
So overall, not much has changed, at least for our proposals and our work plan. I would like to have our commission clerk, Miss April Rafael, provide an update on the Cal LAFCO staff workshop, if she may.
Yes. We had a wonderful time at the actual Ironstone Vineyards in Murphys, California. And if anyone has never been there before, it's a great place to visit. It was like a mini vacation. So I just want to thank everyone here, commissioners, the staff, for allowing me to go. Rachel was unfortunately not able to go. She had a lot of projects at home in the staff report, so we missed her. There was about 112 staff, including the XOs, the clerks, and the analysts. And they had different workshops. There's about 10 workshops, and most of them were listed on the Cal LAFCO website with PowerPoint presentations. So you can refer to that if you'd like to see them. I went to the LAFCO 101 and the Clerk 101 and the Ducks and the disadvantaged unincorporated communities. And there was an incorporations of the actual fire district. So there was a lot of good information out there, and it was an excellent opportunity to meet our fellow clerks and EOs and get best practices and good networking. And it was just really nice to get to see everyone again. The last two were canceled due to COVID. So it's great to get back to seeing people again. Some of the highlights there, if you've never been there, and if you have children or grandchildren, they do have a rubber ducky race in the first Saturday in November. And I think that was great. I wish I had gone with my children when they were younger. Population, it's a small place, 1944. And I thought it was an interesting fact. It's the 17th largest winery in the United States. It's beautiful. The place was just magnificent. There were blooming lilies everywhere, azaleas, rhododendrons. I even after the conference was over, I stayed about an hour and a half and talked to their master gardener there just to get some tips, because I just love gardening. So it was really beautiful. And the highlight for me, and probably one of the key takeaways for me, was that everyone we spoke to, whether it was during breakfast or lunch or dinner, the staff there, they all really love working with LAFCO. No 2 days are ever the same, and we all get along. So it's a great place to be. So thank you so much.
It sounds really fun. It's always tough when it's so gorgeous outside and you have to go inside to work, but been there, done that, and I know exactly how that means. So we have a policy and budget committee meeting on Thursday, June 1st, a special meeting. Make sure it's on your calendars, June 23rd, especially for our new members, our new board members. And a regular meeting will be July 13th. I assume we normally hold meetings in the summer. So
yes, we do.
Okay. All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.